CEO panics without a French translator, until the janitor's 7-year-old daughter takes control and saves his $1 million meeting from disaster, and what he discovers shocks everyone at the meeting. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Michael Harrison's hands trembled as he stared at his phone screen. The text message seemed to burn into his retinas. Mr. Harrison, I'm terribly sorry. Food poisoning. Cannot make it to translate today. Emergency room. Thomas. No, no, and no. Michael shouted, his voice echoing through the empty boardroom of Harrison Industries' 42nd floor. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, New York City buzzed with life, completely unaware that his empire was about to crumble. In exactly 2 hours, Jacques Du Bois and Pierre Laurent, the most powerful venture capitalists in France, would walk through those glass doors. They controlled a fund worth $800 million, and they spoke only French. No English. No exceptions. It was their way of ensuring only the most prepared, most respectful partners earned their investment. Michael had spent 18 months courting this meeting. 18 months of international calls, carefully crafted proposals, and sleepless nights perfecting his pitch. His revolutionary AI software could transform healthcare across Europe, but without their backing, it would remain just another brilliant idea gathering dust. His assistant Rachel Martinez burst through the doors, her usually perfect composure cracked with panic. Sir, I've called every translation service in the city. Everyone's booked, sick, or unavailable on such short notice. Michael loosened his tie, feeling like it was choking him. At 55, he built his company from nothing, a small tech startup in his garage, to a $200 million corporation. But this moment could either launch him into the billionaire stratosphere or watch everything collapse. There has to be someone, Rachel. Anyone. Call the universities, the embassy, I did, sir. Columbia's French department is closed for faculty meetings. The French consulate referred us to the same services that are unavailable. Rachel's voice cracked. Sir, what if we postpone? Michael's blood ran cold. Du Bois made it clear, today or never. They fly back to Paris tonight. He pressed his palms against the mahogany conference table where 20 careers depended on his decisions, where families counted on his success. The elevator chimed softly in the distance, a sound that usually meant nothing but today felt ominous. Soon, those same doors would open to either his salvation or his destruction. But Michael Harrison had no idea that salvation was about to arrive in the most unexpected form, small, innocent, and carrying a mop bucket that was almost too big for her tiny hands. The soft humming drifted through the hallway like a melody from another world. Michael paused his frantic pacing, straining to listen over the thundering of his own heartbeat. Someone was singing. In French? Frère Jacques, dormez-vous, dormez-vous? The voice was small, pure, and unmistakably fluent. Michael's heart nearly stopped beating. He rushed toward the sound, Rachel close behind, their expensive leather shoes clicking frantically against the cold marble floors that had witnessed so many corporate victories and defeats. Around the corner, they found her. A little girl, no more than 7 years old, sat cross-legged beside a janitor's cart that towered over her tiny frame like a mechanical giant. Her dark curls were pulled back in a simple ponytail secured with a faded pink elastic band, and her clothes, a well-worn blue dress that had seen many washings and scuffed white sneakers with mismatched laces, spoke of modest means but careful maintenance. She was organizing cleaning supplies with the methodical precision of someone far beyond her years while singing effortlessly in perfect French pronunciation that would have impressed professors at the Sorbonne. Excuse me, Michael said gently, kneeling down to her eye level on the hard marble floor. His voice was soft and careful, afraid he might startle this unexpected miracle that had appeared in his darkest hour. Sweetheart, what's your name? The girl looked up with wide, intelligent brown eyes that seemed far too wise for someone who should still believe in fairy tales and Santa Claus. There was something almost ethereal about her gaze, as if she could see straight through to people's souls and find the goodness hidden beneath layers of corporate armor and adult cynicism. I'm Sophie Rodriguez. she said with a shy smile that lit up her entire face. My papa works here fixing things. He's down in the basement right now repairing the electrical system, so I'm helping organize his supplies until he's finished with the complicated stuff. Michael's mind raced faster than a Wall Street trading floor during market crashes. Could this be real? Could salvation truly come in such an innocent, unexpected package? Sophie, that beautiful song you were singing. Do you speak French? Sophie's face absolutely lit up with pride that radiated from every pore. Oui, bien sûr. My mama taught me before she went to heaven 2 years ago. She was from Quebec and always said French was the language of her heart, the language where her soul felt most at home. We used to read stories together every single night in French, fairy tales, adventure books, even the business newspapers when I got older. Her smile faltered slightly at the bittersweet memory, but then brightened again with resilient determination. Papa says I should keep practicing every day so Mama would be proud of me from heaven. Rachel gasped audibly, pressing her manicured hand to her chest in shock. Michael felt a surge of hope so powerful it nearly knocked him backward onto the marble floor. Sophie, he said carefully, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. How well do you really speak French? Could you have actual conversations with important grown-ups from France? Oh yes! Sophie nodded enthusiastically, her ponytail bouncing with excitement. I watch French cartoons online every morning before school, and I practice conversation with Mrs. Chen from apartment 4B in our building. She lived in Paris for 20 years working at a fancy hotel, and she says my accent is magnifique. She pronounced the last word with perfect French inflection that would have made native speakers jealous. Michael exchanged a meaningful look with Rachel, both of them recognizing that they might be witnessing something truly miraculous. This was impossible. This was beyond belief. This was... Sir? Rachel whispered urgently, checking her diamond-studded watch with growing panic. They'll be here in exactly 90 minutes. Sophie tilted her head curiously, studying Michael's worried expression with the intuitive understanding that children possess. Are you in trouble? Mr. Papa always says when people look as worried as you do right now, they really need someone to help them solve their problems. Michael's throat tightened with overwhelming emotion. Here was this precious child, innocent and pure as fresh snow, offering to help a complete stranger without asking for anything in return. Sophie, honey, we have some very important visitors coming from France in just a little while. They only speak French, absolutely no English, and our translator got sick at the last minute. Could you possibly help us talk to them? Sophie's eyes grew wide with excitement that could have powered the entire building. Really? You want me to help with something super important? She jumped to her feet, barely reaching Michael's waist even when standing on her tiptoes. I promise I'll do my very, very best. Mama always said that helping others was the most important thing we can do in this world, and that kindness was the greatest treasure anyone could give away. Sophie, we need to prepare you for something very important, Michael said, his voice trembling with a dangerous mixture of desperate hope and paralyzing terror. The weight of 200 employees' livelihoods pressed down on his shoulders like an avalanche of responsibility. Sophie straightened her small shoulders with military determination that would have made 4-star generals weep with pride. Don't worry, Mr. Harrison. Mama used to tell me that when people seem scary on the outside, it's usually because they've forgotten how to be happy on the inside. Maybe I can help them remember what happiness feels like again. Rachel rushed to her mahogany desk and returned with a thick stack of papers covered in dense legal and financial terminology. Sophie, these are some of the complicated words they might use, business terms in French. Can you read these and understand what they mean? Sophie took the papers in her tiny hands, handling them with the reverence of someone touching ancient manuscripts. Her lips moved silently as she read, her brow furrowed in concentration. Michael watched in absolute amazement as her face gradually brightened with understanding, like sunrise breaking over mountain peaks. Oh, these are actually pretty easy, she exclaimed with genuine surprise. Investissement means investment, benefices means profits, contract means contract, and strategy commerciale means business strategy. My mama and I used to play educational word games with her business magazines from the bank where she worked. She said learning was like treasure hunting. Every new word was a precious gem to add to your collection. Michael's eyebrows shot up in shock. Your mother worked at a bank? She was super smart about money and business stuff. She worked at the Royal Bank of Montreal for 8 years before she met Papa and moved to New York. Sophie's voice filled with unmistakable pride that radiated through every word. She used to tell me fascinating stories about helping young families buy their very first houses and about helping dreamers start their own companies from nothing. She always said that understanding money was important for survival, but understanding people's dreams and hopes was infinitely more important for living. Rachel knelt beside Sophie, gently smoothing down her simple dress and readying her ponytail with motherly care. Honey, these are very powerful men who control enormous amounts of money. They might ask you really difficult questions. They might test your French skills to see if you're truly as good as you seem to be. Sophie nodded with serious understanding that belonged on someone 3 times her age. That's perfectly okay with me. When I was scared about starting first grade last year, Mama taught me something really special and important. She explained that when people test you, they're not trying to be mean or hurtful. They're trying to see if you're strong enough and capable enough for something truly important. And I know I'm strong enough because Mama taught me to be brave. Michael felt his chest tighten with overwhelming emotion that threatened to break through his professional composure. This extraordinary little girl possessed a depth of wisdom that most adults never achieved in their entire lifetimes. But the crushing weight of responsibility was slowly destroying him from the inside. If Sophie made even one tiny mistake, if the investors decided she was just a cute distraction, his life's work would collapse into ruins. 200 dedicated employees would lose their jobs before Christmas. Years of groundbreaking research would be completely wasted. Dreams would die painful deaths. Sophie, he said gently, kneeling down to meet her eyes directly, I need to tell you something very important and serious. If this meeting doesn't go perfectly well, many good people might lose their jobs right before the holidays. That wouldn't be your fault. It would be mine for not being properly prepared. But I want you to understand exactly how important this meeting really is. Sophie looked up at him with those impossibly wise brown eyes that seemed to hold centuries of understanding. Mr. Harrison, are you feeling afraid right now? The question hit him like a physical punch to the solar plexus. In 40 years of cutthroat business dealings, no one had ever asked him that question so directly and honestly. Yes, sweetheart. I'm absolutely terrified. Sophie reached up and took his large, calloused hand in her tiny, soft one. It's completely okay to feel afraid sometimes. Mama was really scared when the doctors first told her she was sick, but she explained to me that being afraid just means something matters to you very, very much. That's not bad or wrong, that's actually love showing itself. The elevator chimed with the finality of a church bell announcing Judgment Day. Michael straightened his silk tie one final time, his hands trembling slightly as Sophie stood beside him in the vast boardroom, looking impossibly small against the backdrop of floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the glittering Manhattan skyline. She had insisted on changing into her very best dress. A simple yellow sundress with tiny white flowers that her father had carefully pressed that morning, along with her polished black church shoes that clicked softly against the marble floor. When she walked, her dark hair was now neatly braided with a small yellow ribbon that matched her dress perfectly. Remember, Sophie, Michael whispered, his voice tight with nervous energy that could have powered electrical grids. Just translate exactly what they say to me, and exactly what I say to them. Can you do that for me? Sophie nodded solemnly, her small hands clasped gracefully in front of her like a diplomat preparing for peace negotiations. Don't worry at all, Mr. Harrison. I absolutely won't let you down. Mama always said that when someone trusts you with something important, you protect that trust like it's made of the most precious diamonds in the whole world. The elevator doors opened with a soft mechanical whisper, and Michael's entire world shifted on its axis forever. Jacques Dubois entered first, a tall, impeccably dressed man in his early 60s with distinguished silver hair and the commanding bearing of European royalty. His Navy Armani suit probably cost more than most families spent on groceries in 6 months, and his steel gray eyes held the cold calculation of someone who had destroyed entire companies with nothing more than a dismissive wave of his manicured hand. Behind him, Pierre Laurent moved with the fluid, predatory grace of a shark sensing blood in dark waters. Younger than Jacques by perhaps a decade, but his reputation was even more fearsome throughout international business circles. Financial magazines called him the executioner, because of his legendary ability to dissect failed business pitches with surgical precision, leaving entrepreneurs bleeding and broken on conference room floors. Their penetrating eyes immediately fell on Sophie, and Michael watched in horror as their expressions shifted from mild confusion to what appeared to be barely contained outrage and professional indignation. "Monsieur Harrison," Jacques said in heavily accented English, his tone cold enough to freeze the Hudson River solid. "Tu es que c'est exactement? What is this child doing here in our business meeting? We came here to discuss $800 million in serious investment opportunities, not to play silly games with children." Michael felt his carefully constructed empire beginning to crumble before a single word had been properly translated. His mouth opened to offer desperate explanations, but then something miraculous happened. Sophie stepped forward with quiet dignity that would have made European royalty bow in respectful acknowledgement, her chin raised with the confidence of someone addressing the United Nations General Assembly. "Bonjour, Monsieur Dubois. Bonjour, Monsieur Laurent," she said in absolutely flawless French, her voice clear as crystal church bells ringing across peaceful countryside. "Je suis Sophie Rodriguez, et serai votre interprète professionnel aujourd'hui. J'espère sincèrement que votre vol depuis Paris s'est bien passé et que vous avez trouvé votre hôtel confortable. C'est un honneur de faire votre connaissance." The transformation in the room was instantaneous and utterly magical. Both powerful men's eyebrows shot upward in complete shock, their mouths falling slightly open in undisguised amazement. Sophie had just greeted them in perfect Parisian French with impeccable grammar and pronunciation, introduced herself as their professional interpreter, inquired about their flight and hotel accommodations, and expressed honor at making their acquaintance, all with the sophisticated grace of a seasoned international diplomat. Pierre leaned toward Jacques and whispered rapidly in French, completely unaware that their every word was being understood. "Mon Dieu, did you hear that accent? It's absolutely flawless. Better than most professional translators we've worked with in 20 years of international business. Where could this extraordinary child have possibly learned to speak like this?" Sophie turned to Michael with a gentle, reassuring smile that could have melted icebergs. "Mr. Harrison, Mr. Laurent just expressed amazement at my French accent and asked where I learned to speak so well. He seems very pleasantly surprised by my language abilities. Messieurs, please make yourselves completely comfortable," Michael said, gesturing toward the polished mahogany conference table that had witnessed both spectacular triumphs and devastating defeats over the decades of high-stakes business negotiations. As the distinguished visitors settled into the luxurious leather chairs that cost more than most people's monthly salaries, Sophie climbed gracefully onto a seat that absolutely dwarfed her tiny frame, her small legs dangling freely in the air. She looked like a precious child playing elaborate dress-up games in an adult world of power and money. Yet there was something genuinely regal about her natural composure, an innate grace that commanded immediate respect despite her diminutive size. "Monsieur Harrison," Jacques began in rapid, sophisticated French, his tone now considerably warmer and more respectful than before. "We must honestly admit that we have never in our entire careers conducted serious business negotiations with such a remarkably young interpreter. Please tell us, how did you discover this absolutely extraordinary child?" Sophie translated with smooth, professional confidence that would have impressed United Nations interpreters. Michael felt a powerful surge of protective pride as he carefully answered, "Sophie is the beloved daughter of one of our most valued and trusted employees. When our professional translator became severely ill at the very last moment, she courageously volunteered to help us. I've learned through years of experience that true talent and wisdom often appear in the most unexpected places, and genuine insight frequently comes from the most innocent and pure hearts. As Sophie relayed his heartfelt words in elegant French, Michael watched both intimidating men nod with obvious approval. He could literally see something fundamental shifting in their entire demeanor, a softening of their harsh business masks that he had never witnessed in years of dealing with ruthless European investors. Michael activated the massive presentation screen with technology that represented years of tireless research and development. Gentlemen, I would like to show you exactly why our revolutionary AI healthcare platform will completely transform medical care across Europe and potentially save thousands of precious lives. For the next intensive hour, something truly magical and unprecedented unfolded in that corporate boardroom. Sophie didn't simply translate words from one language to another, she completely transformed the entire dynamic and emotional atmosphere of the meeting. When Michael explained incredibly complex technical concepts about machine learning algorithms and data processing capabilities, she somehow found ways to make them crystal clear and accessible in French. When Jacques asked detailed, probing questions about data privacy regulations and strict GDPR compliance requirements, Sophie's translations were so precise and nuanced that Michael found himself explaining complicated concepts better than he ever had before in his entire career. But her contribution went far beyond mere linguistic skills and technical accuracy. Sophie's innocent presence changed the entire emotional atmosphere of the room like morning sunshine melting away winter frost. Her genuine enthusiasm for the life-saving technology, her pure excitement when Michael explained how the software could help doctors diagnose deadly diseases faster and more accurately than ever before, her absolute joy at being included in something so monumentally important. It all infected the sterile conference room with a warmth and humanity that no professional translator could have possibly provided. This revolutionary algorithm, Michael explained with growing passion, pointing to complex charts and graphs displayed on the enormous screen, can analyze medical imaging 40 times faster than traditional methods, potentially catching cancers and other diseases in their earliest, most treatable stages when patients have the greatest chance of complete recovery. Sophie translated faithfully, but then added something spontaneous that made both powerful investors lean forward with intense interest and visible emotion. Messrs. Mr. Harrison's amazing computer can help doctors find sickness before it grows too big and strong to fight successfully. Like if the doctors had found my mama's sickness much sooner, maybe she would still be here with me today to teach me beautiful new French words and read bedtime stories. The room fell into profound silence except for the soft ticking of an antique clock. Michael's chest tightened with overwhelming emotion as he realized Sophie had just delivered the most powerful, persuasive argument of his entire professional presentation. The golden afternoon sun streamed through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long, dramatic shadows across the polished conference table as the meeting entered its most crucial and potentially devastating phase. Michael had presented every intricate detail of his revolutionary AI platform, answered dozens of complex technical questions with expertise earned through years of dedicated research, and watched Sophie handle every linguistic challenge with the remarkable grace of a seasoned diplomatic interpreter. But now came the moment he'd been dreading with every fiber of his being. The brutal financial negotiations that would ultimately determine whether his lifelong dreams would flourish or die a painful death in this very room. Monsieur Harrison, Jacques said, his tone becoming noticeably more serious and businesslike. Your innovative technology is genuinely impressive, and your presentation has been absolutely unexpected in the most wonderful way imaginable. However, we must now discuss the harsh realities of investment terms and funding arrangements. Sophie translated with perfect accuracy, and Michael felt his stomach clench into tight knots of anxiety. This was historically where promising deals fell apart completely, in the cold, merciless mathematics of risk assessment and return calculations, where human emotions had no place and beautiful dreams were reduced to nothing more than percentages and profit margins. We typically invest no more than $50 million in first-round funding for technological platforms like yours. Pierre continued in rapid French, his intimidating business mask sliding firmly back into place. And we absolutely require 40% equity ownership in return, along with significant operational control over all European business activities. Michael's heart sank like a stone dropped into deep, dark water. $50 million wouldn't be nearly enough to launch his platform across Europe properly, and surrendering 40% of his company would mean losing control of his precious life's work, his technological baby that he had nurtured from a tiny garage startup into a revolutionary medical marvel, before he could formulate any kind of coherent response. Sophie raised her small hand with the quiet confidence of someone addressing the most important world leaders. "Excusez-moi, messieurs," she said with polite respect to the French investors. "May I please ask you both a very personal question?" Both powerful men looked genuinely surprised but nodded with curious interest, clearly intrigued by this little girl's unexpected boldness. "When you were little boys, exactly like I'm a little girl right now," Sophie continued in French with a voice carrying wisdom that seemed impossible for her young age, "did you ever have a dream so incredibly big that it actually scared you? But you knew deep in your hearts that if you could somehow make it come true, it would help lots and lots of people who were hurting and suffering?" Jacques and Pierre exchanged meaningful glances, clearly not expecting such a profound, philosophical question from their 7-year-old interpreter. "I did have such a dream," Jacques admitted slowly, his voice growing soft with distant memory. "I desperately wanted to build schools in my impoverished village. Everyone told me I was too young, too poor, too foolish to dream so impossibly big." "And did you make your dream come true?" Sophie asked, her eyes bright with genuine, caring interest. "Eventually, yes. But it required many difficult years and many special people who believed in impossible dreams when absolutely no one else would dare to." Sophie turned to Pierre with the same earnest, respectful attention. "What about you, Monsieur Laurent? What was your big, scary dream?" Pierre's stern expression melted completely away like ice in warm sunshine. "I wanted to create a modern hospital in my struggling hometown. The doctors there had no advanced equipment, and people died who could have been saved with better medical technology. Did you make your beautiful dream come true too?" "Yes, precious little angel. It's been operating successfully for 15 years now, and it has saved thousands of lives." Sophie nodded thoughtfully, processing this important information with the seriousness of a judge weighing crucial evidence. Then she looked at Michael with such complete trust and admiration that his chest tightened with overwhelming emotion. "Mr. Harrison's dream is exactly like yours were," she said, switching back to French with passionate conviction. "He wants to help doctors save people like my beloved mama. But dreams that big and important need true friends who understand how meaningful they are, not just business partners who only count money." She turned back to the investors with the moral authority that only pure innocence can carry. "My mama used to say that when you find someone with a genuinely good heart and a dream that could help the whole world, you don't just give them some help, you give them enough help to make the dream completely real. Because some dreams are too important for humanity to let them fail." The silence in the boardroom stretched like an eternity, broken only by the soft ticking of Michael's antique grandfather clock and the distant hum of Manhattan traffic 42 floors below. Jacques and Pierre sat motionless, staring at Sophie with expressions that had transformed from skeptical calculation to something approaching wonder. Finally, Jacques cleared his throat, his voice thick with unexpected emotion. "Mademoiselle Sophie, in 30 years of international business dealings, no one has ever made us remember why we first started investing in people's dreams instead of just pursuing profit margins." Pierre nodded slowly, his eyes suspiciously bright with unshed tears. "We began our careers because we wanted to change the world and help brilliant innovators bring their visions to life, not simply to accumulate more wealth. Somewhere along the difficult journey, we forgot that noble purpose." Sophie translated faithfully, though Michael could see she didn't fully grasp the magnitude of what was unfolding before them all. "Monsieur Harrison," Jacques continued in French, rising from his chair with ceremonial dignity, "after careful consideration and this child's remarkable wisdom, we have reached our final decision. We will invest $200 million in your revolutionary company." Michael's legs nearly gave out completely. $200 million. It was 4 times what he had dared to hope for in his wildest, most optimistic dreams. But Jacques wasn't finished with his stunning announcement. "However, we want only 20% equity, not the 40% we typically demand. This precious little angel has reminded us that some dreams are far too important to own, they must be shared with the world. Sophie's eyes grew wide as saucers as she translated the incredible news. Mr. Harrison, they want to give you $200 million. That's enough money to help doctors everywhere. But then Jacques raised his hand, and Michael's soaring heart suddenly stopped. There was always a catch in deals this magnitude. However, we do have one absolutely non-negotiable condition for this unprecedented investment. Michael held his breath, waiting for the crushing blow that would destroy his euphoria. We want Mademoiselle Sophie to become our official youth ambassador for this project. When we launch across Europe, we want her to speak publicly about why this technology matters so desperately. The world needs to hear from someone who truly understands that behind every technological innovation are real people, real families, and real hearts that have been broken by loss. Sophie's mouth fell open in shock. Mr. Harrison, they want me to be an ambassador. That sounds incredibly important and exciting. Michael knelt beside Sophie's oversized chair, his voice choked with overwhelming emotion that threatened to spill over. Sophie, sweetheart, do you understand what has just happened here? These generous men want to give us enough money to help doctors all over the world save lives. And it's entirely because of you, because of your pure heart, your natural kindness, and your incredible gift for bringing out the best in people. Sophie's face glowed with pride, but then her expression grew thoughtful and serious. Mr. Harrison, what exactly does an ambassador do? An ambassador, Michael explained gently, travels to different countries and tells people about important things. You would help us explain to doctors and families how our technology can prevent other children from losing their parents the way you lost your mama. Sophie's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of pure joy and purpose. You mean I could actually help make sure other little girls don't have to say goodbye to their mamas? Yes, precious sweetheart. That's exactly what it means. Pierre leaned forward, speaking directly to Sophie in gentle French. But there's something else equally important, little princess. Part of our investment will establish a complete educational scholarship fund specifically for you, covering everything from elementary school through university, including prestigious schools in France if you choose that path. As Sophie translated this earth-shaking news, her small voice began to tremble with emotion. Mr. Harrison, they want to pay for all of my education? Everything? Even college? Michael felt tears streaming down his face as he nodded. Sophie, these wonderful men want to completely transform your entire life. You'll be able to attend the finest schools in the world, maybe even study in Paris if that's your dream. The elevator chimed softly, and Carlos Rodriguez stepped out carrying his worn toolbox, his work clothes still dusty from repairing electrical systems in the building's basement. He was a small, wiry man in his late 30s with calloused hands that spoke of honest labor and eyes that held the quiet dignity of someone who took pride in his work despite modest circumstances. Sophie? He called out in accented English, looking around the empty hallway with growing concern. Mija, where are you? Papa! Sophie's voice rang out from the boardroom, followed by the rapid clicking of her small shoes against marble floor. She burst through the heavy glass doors and launched herself into her father's arms with the enthusiasm of a missile seeking its target. Papa, Papa! You won't believe what happened. I helped save Mr. Harrison's company, and now I'm going to be an ambassador, and they're going to pay for me to go to school, maybe even in France like Mama always talked about. Carlos held his daughter tightly, his weathered face creased with confusion as he tried to process her rapid-fire explanation. Slow down, Mija. What are you talking about? Michael approached carefully, aware that he was about to change this man's entire world. Mr. Rodriguez, I'm Michael Harrison, CEO of this company. Your daughter just accomplished something absolutely miraculous. Carlos set Sophie down gently, his expression guarded with the wariness of someone who had learned that when wealthy people took interest in his family, it usually meant trouble. What kind of miracle, sir? Papa, Sophie interjected, switching to rapid Spanish. The Frenchmen came for an important meeting, but their translator got sick. I helped Mr. Harrison talk to them in French, and now they want to give him money to help doctors save people like Mama. Carlos's eyes widened in shock. He had always known his daughter was special. Maria had insisted on teaching Sophie French from the time she could speak, claiming their child had a gift for languages that shouldn't be wasted. But this. Jacques and Pierre emerged from the boardroom, having overheard the conversation. Pierre stepped forward and addressed Carlos in careful English. "Mr. Rodriguez, your daughter is extraordinary. She has just helped facilitate the largest business deal of our careers. She saved my company," Michael added, his voice thick with gratitude. "Without Sophie, I would have lost everything." Carlos looked between these powerful men and his small daughter, struggling to comprehend how his little girl had become the center of such momentous events. "I don't understand. Sophie is just a child." "Papa," Sophie said softly, taking his rough hand in her small one. "Remember what Mama used to say? That God sometimes uses the smallest people to do the biggest things? I think today was one of those times." Carlos knelt down to Sophie's level, his eyes searching her face. "Mija, what exactly did you do?" "I translated for Mr. Harrison when the French men came. They were going to give him money to make a computer program that helps doctors, but their translator got sick. So I helped them talk to each other." Sophie's voice grew more excited. "And Papa, they want me to travel and tell people about helping sick people. And they want to pay for me to go to the best schools." Carlos felt his world tilting on its axis. Since Maria's death, he had worked 3 jobs to make ends meet, lying awake at night worrying about Sophie's future, about how he could possibly afford to give her the education her brilliant mind deserved. "Mr. Rodriguez," Jacques said gently, "we would like to offer your daughter opportunities that could change her life forever. But only with your permission and blessing." Carlos looked at his daughter, this precious gift that Maria had left him, and saw her mother's intelligence shining in those wise brown eyes. Maria had always said Sophie was destined for something special, something far beyond the limitations of their circumstances. "What kind of opportunities?" he asked quietly. Michael stepped forward. "A full educational scholarship through university, Mr. Rodriguez. The finest schools available. And when she's older, if she chooses, a role as our ambassador helping to promote life-saving medical technology around the world." Carlos felt tears welling in his eyes. This was everything Maria had dreamed for their daughter. Everything they had prayed for during those long nights in the hospital. "Papa," Sophie whispered, "this is how I can help other families not lose their mamas. This is how I can make Mama proud." Carlos pulled his daughter close, his voice breaking. "Mija, your mama is already proud. She's been proud of you every single day since she went to heaven." 3 hours later, the boardroom had transformed into an impromptu celebration space. Rachel had ordered takeout from the city's finest restaurant, and Sophie sat at the head of the massive conference table, looking like a tiny queen holding court with her devoted subjects. "So let me understand this correctly," Carlos said, still struggling to process the magnitude of what had transpired. "You want Sophie to travel to Europe and speak to doctors and investors about Mr. Harrison's technology?" "Not immediately," Jacques clarified patiently. "Sophie is still very young. We envision this happening gradually, over several years, as she grows and matures. Perhaps starting with small local events, then expanding internationally as she becomes more comfortable with public speaking." Sophie bit into her gourmet chicken sandwich with gusto, completely unfazed by the life-altering decisions being made around her. "Papa, Mrs. Chen always says I'm very good at explaining things. Maybe I can explain Mr. Harrison's computer program to people." Michael watched this precious child who had saved his empire, marveling at her resilience and natural confidence. "Sophie, you understand that being an ambassador means sometimes talking to lots of people at once? Big crowds?" Sophie nodded enthusiastically. "Like when I had to recite the French poem at our school's International Day. I was scared at first, but then I remembered Mama watching from heaven, and I felt brave." Pierre smiled warmly. "We would provide the finest public speaking coaches and ensure Sophie receives proper training before any major appearances." But Carlos still looked worried, his paternal instincts warring with the incredible opportunities being offered. "Senor Harrison, I'm just a maintenance worker. I don't know anything about business or high society. How can I guide Sophie through this world? You won't be alone, Michael assured him. We'll provide support, guidance, and resources. And Carlos, never underestimate the value of the foundation you and Maria gave Sophie. Her character, her kindness, her wisdom, that didn't come from money or education. That came from love. Sophie reached across the table and patted her father's calloused hand. Papa, remember what Mama used to read to me from the Bible? About how God chooses ordinary people to do extraordinary things? Maybe this is our extraordinary thing. Carlos felt his heart breaking open with pride and fear in equal measure. His little girl was ready to take on the world, but was the world ready for her pure heart? There's something else we need to discuss, Jacques said gently. The media attention this story will generate will be significant. A 7-year-old girl saving a multi-million-dollar deal? The press will be fascinated. Michael's expression grew serious. We'll need to be very careful about protecting Sophie's privacy and ensuring her safety. I can handle reporters, Sophie declared confidently. I'll just tell them the truth, that helping people is the most important thing, and sometimes big miracles come in small packages. The adults exchanged amused glances at her matter-of-fact approach to fame. Sophie, Pierre said thoughtfully, what would you say to those doctors in Europe? How would you explain why this technology matters? Sophie's expression grew serious, and suddenly she seemed far older than her 7 years. I would tell them that every number on their computer screen represents someone's mama or papa or child. I would say that when they use Mr. Harrison's program to catch sickness early, they're not just saving one person, they're saving all the people who love that person from having their hearts broken like mine was. The room fell silent. Even these powerful business leaders were moved by the profound wisdom flowing from such a young heart. And, Sophie continued softly, I would tell them that Mama is watching from heaven, and she's proud that her little girl is helping other families stay together. Carlos wiped tears from his eyes, finally understanding that this wasn't just about money or opportunities. This was about purpose. This was about Maria's legacy living on through their daughter. Okay, Mija, he whispered. Let's change the world. 2 weeks had passed since the miraculous meeting, and Sophie had become something of a local celebrity. The story of the 7-year-old girl who saved a multi-million-dollar business deal had spread through social media like wildfire, with news outlets clamoring for interviews. But on this particular morning, as Sophie sat in Michael's office reviewing her first ambassador speech with a professional coach, an unexpected visitor arrived. Mr. Harrison? Rachel's voice came through the intercom, sounding strangely tense. There's a woman here to see you. She says it's about Sophie Rodriguez, and it's urgent. Michael looked up from the speech notes, frowning. Send her in. The woman who entered was elegantly dressed, perhaps in her 50s, with silver hair and piercing blue eyes that held a mixture of determination and nervousness. She carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to boardrooms and high-stakes negotiations. Mr. Harrison, my name is Catherine Dubois, she said, extending a manicured hand. I believe you know my husband, Jacques. Michael's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Mrs. Dubois. What brings you here? Catherine's gaze fell on Sophie, who was practicing her pronunciation of technical terms with the speech coach. Her expression softened dramatically. I came because of her. Because of what my husband told me about this extraordinary child. Is there a problem with the investment? Michael asked, concern creeping into his voice. Quite the opposite, Catherine said, settling into a chair. But there's something I need to tell you, something that changes everything we thought we knew about Sophie Rodriguez. Sophie looked up from her notes, sensing the gravity in the adult conversation. Hello, Mrs. Dubois. Are you here to help me practice my French? Catherine's eyes filled with tears as she heard Sophie's flawless accent. Sophie, darling, how much do you know about your mother's family in Quebec? Sophie tilted her head thoughtfully. Not very much. Mama said her family was from Montreal, but they weren't close. She came to New York when she was young and never really talked about them. Catherine reached into her purse and pulled out an old photograph. Sophie, I want you to look at this picture very carefully. The photograph showed a young woman who looked remarkably like Sophie's mother, standing beside a distinguished older man in front of what appeared to be a grand estate. That's my sister, Marie Dubois, Catherine said softly. She disappeared from our family 20 years ago after an argument with our father about marrying someone he considered beneath our social status. Sophie stared at the photograph, her small hands trembling. That looks like my mama. But her name was Maria Rodriguez, not Marie Dubois. People sometimes change their names when they want to start new lives. Catherine explained gently. Sophie, I believe your mother was my niece. Which means you're my grandniece. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the clock. Michael felt as if the universe had just shifted on its axis once again. But that would mean... Michael started. That Sophie is a Dubois. Catherine finished. One of the wealthiest families in France. My father, Sophie's great-grandfather, passed away last year and left a substantial inheritance that we've been unable to claim because we couldn't locate Marie or her descendants. Sophie looked between the adults, trying to process this earth-shattering revelation. Does this mean I'm rich? Catherine smiled through her tears. Sophie, darling, it means you're the heir to a $50 million estate in France. But more importantly, it means you have family who has been searching for you for years. Carlos, who had been called from his work, arrived just in time to hear this stunning announcement. His face went pale as he took in the implications. Senora, are you saying that Maria was from a wealthy family? The wealthiest. Catherine confirmed. But Maria chose love over money when she left to marry Carlos and start a new life. She chose happiness over inheritance. Sophie stood up slowly, her young mind trying to comprehend how her life had changed once again. Mr. Harrison, does this change our plans? Does this change me being an ambassador? Michael knelt beside her, his voice gentle but firm. Sophie, this doesn't change who you are. You're still the same brave, kind, brilliant girl who saved my company. Money doesn't change your heart. But Catherine had one more surprise. Actually, Sophie, this inheritance comes with something even more valuable than money. Your great-grandfather's estate includes a children's hospital in Lyon, France. A hospital that desperately needs modernization and new technology. Sophie's eyes lit up with sudden understanding. You mean, I could help Mr. Harrison's computer program go to that hospital? I could help doctors there save children? That's exactly what it means, Catherine said. Sophie, you could be the bridge between two worlds. The technology that saves lives and the resources to make it available to those who need it most. The revelation of Sophie's true identity had sent shockwaves through everyone involved. As the heir to the Dubois estate, Sophie was no longer just a working-class girl who had saved a business deal. She was now a key figure in a complex web of international business, family legacy, and medical philanthropy. The irony is extraordinary, Jacques said as he sat in Michael's office with his wife Catherine, Carlos, and Sophie. My business partner and I invested in your company because a little girl convinced us to follow our hearts, only to discover that this little girl is my own grandniece. Sophie swung her legs from the oversized chair, still trying to process her new reality. Papa, does this mean we have to move to France? Carlos looked overwhelmed by the complexity of the situation. Mija, I don't know. This is all so much bigger than anything I ever imagined. Nobody has to move anywhere, Catherine assured them gently. But Sophie, you now have choices that most children never dream of. You could attend the finest schools in France, or stay here in New York, or split your time between both countries. Michael had been quietly contemplating the implications. There's something else to consider. With Sophie's inheritance including the children's hospital in Lyon, we could create the world's first fully integrated AI-assisted pediatric medical center. It would be a model for the entire world. Sophie's eyes grew wide with excitement. You mean, I could help build a special hospital just for kids? Where they use your smart computer to help them get better? Exactly, Michael said. You wouldn't just be our ambassador, you'd be our partner. But then Rachel burst through the door, her face pale with panic. "Mr. Harrison, we have a problem. The media has discovered Sophie's connection to the Dubois family. There are reporters downstairs, and someone leaked information about the inheritance." Through the window, they could see news vans gathering on the street below. The simple story of a little girl saving a business deal had just become an international sensation involving French nobility, missing heirs, and vast fortunes. "Papa, why do all those people want to talk to me?" Sophie asked, pressing her face to the window. "Because your story is extraordinary, Mija," Carlos said, pulling her close protectively. "But extraordinary stories sometimes attract people who don't have good intentions." Catherine's expression grew serious. "This changes things significantly. Sophie's safety must be our primary concern now. There will be people who try to take advantage of her, who see only the money and not the precious child." "What do we do?" Michael asked, feeling the weight of responsibility for this little girl who had become so important to all of them. "We protect her," Jacques said firmly. "And we make sure that whatever decisions are made, they're made in Sophie's best interests, not for the convenience of adults." Sophie, oblivious to the danger swirling around her newfound wealth, was still focused on the possibility of helping sick children. "Mr. Harrison, if we build the special hospital, could we make sure that kids like me who don't have mamas anymore get extra hugs from the nurses?" The innocent question broke through all the adult anxiety like sunshine through storm clouds. Here was a child who had just learned she was worth $50 million, and her first thought was still about helping others. "Sophie," Catherine said softly, "you are exactly what our family has been missing. Your mother chose love over money, and she raised you to have the heart of an angel." "But Mama always said that money is just a tool," Sophie replied thoughtfully. "Like Papa's wrenches. It's only good if you use it to fix something that's broken." Carlos felt tears welling in his eyes as he recognized Maria's wisdom flowing through their daughter. "What do you want to fix, Mija?" Sophie looked around at all these adults who cared about her, then back out the window at the crowds gathering below. "I want to fix the sadness that kids feel when they're sick and scared. I want to fix the worry that mamas and papas have when they don't know if their children will get better. And I want to make sure that doctors have the best tools to help everyone." Michael realized that this 7-year-old girl had just articulated a mission statement that would guide not just his company, but potentially transform pediatric medicine around the world. "Then that's exactly what we'll do," he said, his voice filled with determination. "Together." But outside, the media storm was growing, and with it, challenges that would test whether a little girl's pure heart could survive in a world that often valued wealth over wisdom. 6 months later, the auditorium of the newly renovated Dubois Children's Hospital in Lyon, France was filled to capacity with doctors, investors, medical researchers, and journalists from around the world. The morning sun streamed through stained glass windows that had been carefully preserved from the hospital's original 19th century construction, casting rainbow patterns across faces filled with anticipation. But all eyes were focused on the small figure standing confidently at the podium, Sophie Rodriguez Dubois, now 8 years old, wearing a simple blue dress that her father had carefully pressed that morning. Her dark hair was braided with the same yellow ribbon she had worn during that life-changing meeting in Michael's boardroom, and around her neck hung a delicate gold locket containing her mother's photograph. "Bonjour, Mesdames et Messieurs," Sophie began, her voice clear and strong as it echoed through the sophisticated sound system. "My name is Sophie, and I want to tell you a story about miracles." In the front row, Carlos sat with tears already streaming down his weathered face, his calloused hands clasped tightly in his lap. Beside him, Michael Harrison fidgeted nervously with his tie, still amazed that this extraordinary child had not only saved his company but had become his closest partner in revolutionizing pediatric medicine. Catherine and Jacques Dubois sat nearby, their faces glowing with pride for this remarkable grandniece who had brought their fractured family back together while teaching them the true meaning of wealth. 6 months ago, Sophie continued, switching effortlessly between French and English so that everyone could understand her message. "I was just a little girl whose mama had gone to heaven, and whose papa worked very hard to take care of me. I thought miracles only happened in fairy tales and Bible stories. She paused, scanning the audience with those wise brown eyes that had captivated world leaders and medical professionals alike. But then I learned that miracles happen every day, when people choose to use their gifts to help others instead of just helping themselves. Sophie gestured toward the massive screen behind her, which displayed real-time data from the hospital's revolutionary AI system that had been operational for 3 months. This computer program that Mr. Harrison created doesn't just analyze medical information. It sees every child who comes through these doors as someone's precious son or daughter. It works day and night to catch diseases early, so families don't have to say goodbye the way I said goodbye to my mama. A collective murmur of emotion rippled through the audience as the screen showed statistics that were beyond remarkable: a 47% increase in early disease detection, a 33% reduction in treatment time, and most importantly, dozens of young lives already saved. But the real miracle, Sophie said, her voice growing stronger with conviction, isn't the technology. The real miracle is what happens when people remember that love is more powerful than money, that kindness is more valuable than profit, and that sometimes the biggest changes come from the smallest hands. She held up her tiny hands, and laughter mixed with tears throughout the auditorium. When I first met the French gentlemen who became my granduncle Jacques and Monsieur Laurent, they were thinking like businessmen. But when they started thinking like people who remembered their own dreams, everything changed. They didn't just invest money, they invested their hearts. Jacques wiped his eyes discreetly, remembering how this child had stripped away decades of cynical business calculation with nothing but pure honesty. Today, this hospital represents something bigger than advanced technology or large investments. Sophie continued, her voice taking on the authority of someone far beyond her years. It represents what happens when we stop asking how much can I get, and start asking how much can I give. The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word from this remarkable child who spoke with the wisdom of ages. My mama used to tell me that heaven isn't a place you go when you die. It's a place you create when you live by loving others more than yourself. And I think... Sophie paused, looking up toward the beautiful stained glass windows. I think Mama can see that we've built a little piece of heaven right here. She gestured toward a group of children in wheelchairs near the front, young patients from the hospital who had specifically asked to attend Sophie's speech. Their faces were bright with hope and joy, living proof of the lives already being transformed by the medical advances housed within these walls. To the doctors here today, when you use this technology to save a child, you're not just treating a patient. You're protecting someone's dreams, someone's future, someone's reason for believing in miracles. Her voice softened as she looked directly at her father. To Papa, who taught me that honest work and love are the greatest treasures anyone can possess. Thank you for showing me that being rich means having enough to share, not having enough to hoard. Carlos stood up spontaneously, applauding through his tears, and the entire auditorium erupted in thunderous recognition. And to every person here today, Sophie concluded, raising her voice above the applause, remember that miracles aren't rare, magical events. Miracles happen every time someone chooses compassion over competition. Every time someone sees potential instead of problems, and every time someone decides that other people's happiness matters as much as their own. She stepped back from the podium, but then returned for one final thought. Oh, and one more thing, she said with a mischievous smile that reminded everyone she was still just 8 years old. If anyone ever tells you that you're too small to make a big difference, just remember that I was 7 years old when I helped change the world. Size doesn't matter when your heart is big enough. As Sophie walked off the stage to a standing ovation that lasted 10 full minutes, Michael realized that this child hadn't just saved his company or revolutionized pediatric medicine. She had reminded an entire world that the most powerful force in the universe isn't technology or money. It's the pure, unshakable belief that every life matters and every dream deserves a chance to come true. Later that evening, as Sophie sat in her father's lap in their hotel room overlooking the lights of Lyon, she asked quietly, Papa, do you think Mama would be proud of what we did? Carlos held his daughter close, his heart overflowing with love and pride. Mija, your mama isn't just proud. She's absolutely radiating with joy in heaven, knowing that her little girl took all the love she gave you and multiplied it into love for the whole world. Sophie smiled sleepily, clutching her mother's locket. I think tomorrow I want to visit the children's ward and read French stories to the kids who are getting better. Mama always said the best medicine was knowing someone cared about you. And in that moment, Carlos knew that despite all the money, fame, and opportunity that had transformed their lives, his daughter's heart remained exactly what it had always been, pure, generous, and completely focused on healing a broken world, one small act of love at a time.